You've talked a little bit about critical infrastructure. I want to just kind of pivot over to the 189 billion that's being allocated to INEC for the elections within this request. When you look at that money and you look at some of the developments that have occurred over the last few months, we heard there was going to be the establishment of hundreds of new polling units around the country. There was so much controversy around that, people raising concerns that if they establish these new polling units, maybe it's going to favor a particular part of the country. INEC ends up walking that back and saying there will be no more polling units. We need to reduce the cost of the election. In view of all of that, in view of infrastructure deficits around the country and the need to get the materials to such far-flung areas around the country, is there not a very kind of a strong argument to be made that this kind of funding, given the peculiarities of our environment, is necessary?
Now, well, again, I say about short-term thinking. If we know every 4 years there should be an election, INEC should be able to plan their logistics. See, okay, if there is difficulty, they should be able to, within 4 years, to solve that logistic problem. And not few days before election, you begin to request for funds, and you begin to also say, okay, during election day, materials are not there. You keep doing that every time. Materials are not there. Logistics problem. Why don't you sit down and solve this problem? If somebody, is not benefiting from it, the point is that at everything, every decision, every policy, there's always a vested interest. And until we begin to think less of ourselves, personal interest, and be more altruistic, that is the only way we can move forward in all the things that we. People have good ideas on how to solve this problem. But if it's not benefiting the person in charge or some of his cronies or something, some interest, that policy is everywhere in the world. But again, we find that when governments make policies, it is not most of the time for the interest of the masses. It's all about interests. So that is the point I'm making. INEC should be more strategic in their planning, knowing that every year, what do we do after this? And the same problem keeps recurring. That shows that somebody is not doing his work.
Dr. Nweze, this is actually part of the conversation that I was fortunate to have had with the INEC Director of ICT and also the INEC Director of Media just the other day about this kind of perpetual reality we find ourselves in which we are always importing new technology. When we talk about card readers, after we talk about card readers, we're talking about the enhancement of card readers. At what point, if we're trying to reduce the cost of elections, at what point do you think we should begin to try and break that cycle with enhanced investments in things like research and development? It's a question that I asked previously. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, research and development is very critical in this kind of thing. But again, we have to look at the structure. How do the structure that we run, political structure that we run in Nigeria, it shows each time we have this thing, somebody has to take a look at it and say, look, is it working or not? We keep having, this perennial problem. That shows that something is not working. Why don't you just crash it and start all over again and see what works for us?
Why don't you proffer one of the solutions you're thinking about?
No, the thing is that the political system that we run, the liberal democracy that we try to run after the American system, is like alien to us. We need a homegrown thing. And that's why people are clamoring for restructuring. The way we run elections, there are ways that we can say, okay, if we accept that, we have to run a rotational system, for instance. If, for instance, my region is supposed to produce the presidency, there should be no election in other edition. They should just focus on people who are supposed to run for presidency must come from within that region where the president should come. Presidency should come. We don't need other parts of Nigeria to vote for that. That way you reduce the costs of this. If we accept rotational system, that way it reduces the costs. The same thing goes for governorship. Where you are governor, in that case, the state is running an election and all that. So governorship can run the state, and I can focus on running a state distance. Election can also be staggered. It must not hold on, the same day as We can see how we can stagger it. If the capacity is not there for INEC to handle in one day. So we can stagger elections, just like, Ekiti has held, and then Osun State is coming up. Anambra was held last time. We can stagger some of these elections. So that it will be easier for INEC to handle.
Dr. Nweze, some individuals have looked at, kind of the electoral system in the country, and on the one hand, you have idealists who proffer similar solutions to what you have offered this morning, which is that we can essentially decentralize and state governments or regional governments, however it would pan out in a restructuring kind of context, would be able to run their own elections. But then there are the pragmatists who said that we have to look at precedent when we talk about potential options for the future. And precedent shows very clearly that where states have control over the electoral system through the state independent electoral commissions, local government elections have become an obvious charade all around the country. It's not limited to a region or a party. Everybody who has control over their CX manipulate it and abuse it to have their own political interests at the local government level. In view of that, would you now say it's time to entrust those same officials with the power to essentially rig themselves as governors back into office? What are your thoughts about that?
Well, the thing is, essentially, if the system we are running now, there is intolerance, political intolerance. People feel that, if I don't get in now, that means that's as if they're going to die tomorrow. I've gone through elections, 2 elections, 2011 and 2015. And once the election is over, I say, okay, goodbye, when I go back to my work. But the point is that we need political education. You need to prepare people. The Nigerians are not educated enough to, politically. There's so much, and there's a critical level of literacy level that you require to run a democracy. There's a critical level of education that you require in any economy for your economy to grow. The level of literacy level in Nigeria is maybe below 50%, okay? And it's not enough to run a sophisticated system that we pretend to run. Now, you cast your mind back. How were we able to select our community leaders in the past? Why don't we incorporate that into our political system? You go to a community, they will usually select a headmaster, a teacher, to represent them one way or the other in the community. How were they able to select based on certain set of criteria? So why don't we incorporate that? That's why I said that the system we run is alien to us. We should go back. The system that works in Sokoto may not be the same that works in Bayelsa and that kind of a thing. But let every community, until eventually it will become a national culture. Okay? So we need to start somewhere. So to build a system that is homegrown to us.
Dr. Nweze, what's your response to those who say no matter what system you produce through a restructuring effort, let's say we go back to the regional system of the First Republic, or we modify our presidential system, or whatever it is comes out of it, that whether it's Sokoto, whether it's Onitsha, whether it's Port Harcourt, whether it's Lagos, whether it's Makurdi, that what you have around the country is a non-meritocratic system of godfatherism.
That's right.
And that no matter what structure you put in place, it's going to be those godfathers that are going to decide who gets what office. And that as long as that is the case, no matter what system you produce, there will be the associated vices of corruption, etc., under this godfather model that we're running. How do you now, kind of in view of that, evolve the kind of structure you're talking about where the grassroots actually has the power?
Now, yeah, it's actually, we need a leadership. Everything boils down to the kind of leadership that we have. And we need some kind of tragic hero concept of leadership, whereby a leader comes up, has a vision, is compassion to the masses, to the people, and really wants to do something that has intellectual capacity and has some competencies, okay, to go, to lead. Because, people don't prepare themselves to be leaders. They just want to run for, then you need to be prepared, you know. And again, so when you do that, the tragic hero kind of leader will begin to put some of this, you know, institutionalize some of this and strengthen the institutions. Make sure that everything is in place. He may sacrifice his own this thing. So the job I'm coming to do is just to fix this thing, make sure that everything works, so that the system can throw up the right people, okay? So that those right people will also be able to do stuff. It's easy to do, but it takes leadership to be able to do that.
Dr. Nweze, I believe that's a fine place to leave it. You've left our viewers with some food for thought this morning, and we thank you so much for coming on the program
Thank you.
this morning and sharing your thoughts.